this meetup today is one that we've done something along these lines in the past. These two folks have been on stage with me before. I'd have to go back and find the YouTube vid for it, but I think the time is right to do this again and to do it in a more detailed kind of way. Let's just talk really briefly about this team and one of the sort of hurdles, I guess we'll call it, that we've had to get over. And anybody that's been here for any length of time knows that we've had to get over a lot of hurdles. That we haven't really had it the same way a lot of the different crypto projects have had it. We started at the wrong time. We came to it from a different perspective, wanting to do something that was more real and product driven and not focused on the crypto world. We didn't really, do a lot of the things that most crypto projects focus on in terms of building out big coin tranches to crypto VCs, and then, focusing more on coin value instead of product development. So, we built a lot of hurdles for ourselves, and a lot of hurdles are just naturally been in our thing. One of those hurdles is, that as a team of developers, we don't have a lot of crypto-based or big, technology arena backgrounds. We all have pretty deep backgrounds, and we're going to share those today. But, there's no luminaries on our team, right? So it's like when you look at a team resume, if you're an investor and so forth, you have to kind of dig into it. You have to kind of understand why we're here and why we're the right people to be here, because the name recognition isn't going to pop out, right? There's no Vitaliks in this group. And when I say that, I'm not even being, even condescending or whatever, even to this day, the original Saya founders, David specifically, is pretty well known in the Bitcoin community because in those early days, he made a very big show of going out and hitting all of those kinds of, conferences to do talks and so forth about what he was building, and got that recognition. And let's be honest about it, it helped to drive their coin price up and to get them into a place where they are. And we haven't done a lot of that, and I don't look to see us doing a lot of it now. We'll go out and do presentations and stuff, but when we do, it's going to be trained to selling our products, and it's going to be related to getting our product recognition out there. I love our product, man. I got to tell you, these trainings are really just showing and highlighting to me just how great this product is. And when you guys do finally start to see it, if you haven't set up a relayer yourself, you're going to get that understanding. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about myself, which is my favorite topic, and then I'll talk about the two fellows next to me. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay out a template on how the meeting's going to go by, talking a little bit about myself. The two fellows will then come along and they will do the same thing. And then we're going to get into kind of a roundtable conversation about the products and the project and what we've done and how we got here and where we expect to go and so forth. So I'm going to start a little bit with history just to kind of give you some background, because I've talked a lot about this stuff, but never really brought it all under one big kind of thing and just sort of explained it. First of all, let's talk about how old I really am, because I'm really freaking old. Let's just say that I went to an Aerosmith concert on their third record, so you'll have to go figure that out. But essentially what happened was for me is I got started in technology in the 80s. And in the 80s, there was an interesting sort of paradigm where LAN, local area networking, was really becoming a big thing. That was the big drive back then. We were moving away from mainframe computers and into personal computers. Steve Jobs had hit the scene, Bill Gates, they were all rolling out, personal computers. And to make personal computers really effective and work well, they had to be connected up to a server. And so that was really sort of the whole drive. So my whole background didn't come in from that networking side. My whole background came in that I was working on presentations and graphics, because the girl that I was actually living with back then was just a fantastic artist, and her father got her into computer graphics, and I saw it and I just sort of took to it. At that time, I was a professional musician. So I didn't really have that as my dream goal or my dream sort of direction. I was actually playing music, but I just kept showing up and show me this, show me how to work this machine and, do this kind of thing. And one thing led to another, and I sort of fell into it. And back then, what ended up happening is I fell into a company that was doing presentations, and we were starting to get into the video side of things, and we were doing all Macintosh. And I found a company called Radius that was building these special cards that could capture video on the Macintosh. And so I went to a seminar in Minneapolis, and in the seminar, one of the things that they showed was this whole complete workstation to do this. Now, at that time, if you were going to be doing video, yes, you could do some stuff on a Commodore, but mostly what it was on big high-end, very proprietary workstations. Avid was pretty much the company that you went to for this kind of thing. Well, there was another company that was just getting started about that time. They were called Micronet. And I was really fascinated by this because there was this box sitting on right next to the Mac, and it was the same gray as the Mac. So, they were really trying to blend in and do this kind of, build this environment ecosystem. And so I got up there and I asked him, I said, well, tell me about this device, because I'm going to have to go back and buy all this for our shop. And he said, yep, you can buy this right now. This is cutting edge. This is the biggest thing you can get right now for this. And it's 2 drives that are put together in a RAID 0 configuration so that you can store all this, video, because video takes up a humongous amount of space. And I said, okay, cool. So how big are these drives? Because they must be gigantic. And he said, they are. They're huge. Each drive is 1 gigabyte, right? So we had 2 1 gig drives that were slaved together at a RAID 0. And that's where I kind of came into storage. And then in the next sort of decade that came by, I kind of started to get into the whole networking side of things at the same time. I was, still focused on this video stuff and the video production stuff, but I also got invited to run a company of retail computer chain that actually needed to be sort of turned into something else because the computer stores were sort of imploding. So what I did was I went to, the whole local area networking thing. And so we became Novell providers. I became a CNE. All of our people's trained up and became CNEs, certified network engineer or certified Novell engineer, and essentially did all that. But then 94 came along, and in 94, the internet was coming about. So we stood up big banks of public modems so that we could provision internet for the place where I was living in Michigan and where this company was based out of. And so I got really kind of deep into that. That whole graphics and video thing was still going on the side. I was doing a lot of the commercials for our company and, kind of doing that. And then kind of that had run its course, and I decided, things are really kind of moving fast in the late 90s, if you remember. And I said I wanted to kind of go and do something a little bit more on my own and so forth. So I left that. I took a consulting gig in libraries where I provisioned some big internet type capabilities. And I knew that was just sort of a 1-year type gig. But then when I left that's when I really did what I thought was really going to be the rest of my life in a lot of ways. I built a company to build custom video production machines, and it really leapt to the top of the stack for the first, 4 or 5 years that we were in business. Everybody knew who we were. We sold a lot of computers to people all over the world. I put units in at the Boston Red Sox. United States Marine Corps bought a whole bunch from us. I mean, we were selling units to everybody. And it was a really great sort of a deal. Now, at this point in time, we're a decade and a half later, hard drives are a lot bigger, right? They're a lot huger, and they're like 75, instead of whatever. So what we had done at that point was we had started putting together, RAID drives and systems. And in that company, I had been using all different brands: Western Digital, Seagate, Maxtor. There were a lot of different brands out there back then. There were a lot of different manufacturers. But there was a nemesis company out there, and a guy named Charles McConaughey who really had convinced everybody that IBM was the brand to go with. And I didn't fight it. I just said, look, if everybody believes that's the story, let's go ahead and we'll follow along with it. And we started putting these IBM Death Stars and all these machines. And what ended up happening was a run of these drives just started failing. And they literally failed 400 computers that we had out all over the world. And it put me behind a really bad 8 ball because essentially all of our machines were failing. And for the next 2 years, I spent my entirety no longer selling new machines. It was all about cleaning up this mess. So that whole thing was on a trajectory like this, and it came crashing right down to the ground because of this situation. I didn't deal with it very well. I didn't deal with it well personally. I didn't deal with it, well professionally. I didn't do the right things from a standpoint of like lawsuits or any of that sort of stuff. I certainly had them. I settled with a motherboard manufacturer for a problem that they had introduced behind it. But at the end of the day, I just kind of walked away, when it was all said and done. We took care of all of our customers, and I just kind of waved goodbye to that company and let it go. Emotionally, I was a wreck for a couple of years. I was just not really in a good place. But finally, I started coming back around, and one of the things that had happened was I had got my first German Shepherd about halfway through that company. So I had had a companion that really, you know, kind of was with me through thick and thin through that. And I kind of came back around and I said, I started college back in the 80s, but I never finished it. And I only had finished about a year. So I went back to college. I went to CSU and I just got my degree. I said, you know what, it's time. I'm going to go ahead and get my degree. And I did. And I came out of there with a flat 4.0 GPA and essentially, felt ready to take on the world again. And that was about 2014, 2015, somewhere in that neighborhood. And then I went out and started working as a consultant to do a bunch of this video streaming stuff, which was really big and powerful at that point in time. And guess what? Hard drives and storage was big in the video streaming world because you had to have some place to save and capture all of this stuff for later repurposing out for internet related video. And of course, the internet now was a big thing for video. So, that was really a happening thing. I designed a couple of award-winning products. I designed the Wirecast gear for a company named Telestream. I designed a little suitcase portable machine for a company called vMix, which makes a very good streaming software, live production software. And so that seemingly was the direction that I was going to be heading on. And then all of a sudden something happened and, I rediscovered crypto. I had discovered crypto back in 2011, but I didn't buy into it. I didn't believe in it. And everything that I had done with computers used NVIDIA. So I didn't really have any in to Bitcoin. Mining it didn't work on NVIDIA very well. You needed AMD, and I just never really had those cards, so it never really happened for me. Played poker and made a few Bitcoins, but I immediately turned them into cash. Used a site called Dwala, if you remember that, for doing that kind of transfer over. So that's how I kind of came into it. And how I came into it was I just bought a shed load of NVIDIA graphics cards in 2016 and 2017. And I was just mining like crazy, and I was mining Ethereum. And what happened back in those days was if you mined Ethereum, you had the ability to dual mine another coin. And I chose this one called Siacoin or Siacoin, I don't know how you say it. And then I kind of started to fall into the understanding about what they were doing and really got into their community and figured out, where they were at. Then I started to figure out what all their weaknesses were. That's when the whole vision sort of came upon me that, really this thing needs to go a different direction. I tried to convince David of it. I did it, gently and politely at first. I got more strident over time until finally we became very much like this. But even so, when it all melted down and they decided to fork off the ASICs that they did, and we saw an opening to start this project, I was genuine on my side to being very supportive and friendly and hoping that they would be supportive and friendly back. And we took off that way at the fork to start this project. It didn't work out that way because they were not, honest brokers with us. They were doing the opposite of what they said they were going to do. But what it did is it provided us a very good sort of natural jumping off point to start this project. What was going on over there was while we were doing all of this, my main focus was primarily as a trader, right? I wasn't really into the cryptography side of things, and I wasn't deep into, any of the whole, politics side of it. I'm not really a libertarian. I think everybody who knows me now knows I'm a pretty dyed-in-the-wool progressive. I eat granola every single day, and if I had my choice, everybody would get free UBI for, income so that they could go off and become painters and sculptors and dancers and things like that. That's who I am. Crypto is made up mostly of libertarian and hard right-wing people, so I don't always really fit very well in this whole milieu. But I think that we all can agree on one thing, and that's that this networking thing that came along is a pendulum. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop where I'm at right now, and I'm going to go ahead and start to turn it over to the other guys. But what I want to say right here is where I think we are is in this pendulum swing, is that back in those early days where local area networks prevailed, and it was a very much a hub and spoke client server environment, the internet came along and smashed that, right? And then what we ended up with was a distributed network, and there was Usenet News, and there was Gopher, and there was FTP, and there were all kinds of permissionless things that you could go out and do, and anybody that could sit down and learn a little bit of this HTML markup language could just build a web page and put it out there, and they were gloriously awful, but they were, you being able to talk to somebody else directly and not to have gatekeepers and so forth. And there was AOL was out there and all of that stuff, and search engines were just getting started, but it was a wonderful decentralized kind of an environment. And we all know what happened throughout the aughts. The big centralization thing happened again. The pendulum swung back the other way because people like Facebook and, even YouTube and some of the bigger Google people started to come along and really recognize that they could aggregate all the data, they could aggregate the accounts, they could make it convenient, they could make it slick, they could make it wonderful. And ultimately, they delivered a great internet. I mean, you can't look at it and say that what was delivered wasn't really awesome and didn't provide us with a lot of productivity and benefits and so forth along the way. But what's happened is a lot of, nonsense and a lot of really sort of nastiness because these people are injecting their own biases onto things. They're bringing in people like Cambridge Analytica who came in and, essentially showed them how to influence elections. There's all kinds of just things that are happening there. So I get the whole crypto sort of deal, which is about how we need to, build a free internet, and we need to get to that place where there's no censorship, and that, I totally grasp it and I totally understand. But I also understand that business has to get done. And if business has to get done, there still has to be guardrails, and there still has to be some rules of the road so that, it's not just one big giant car crash. And so that's been our giant overriding vision focus, has been about building a product that can be more decentralized and distributed, but can maintain some of those guardrails so that it isn't a free-for-all, so that there isn't all this, nastiness that shows up on the network and so forth. And I think that people are finally starting to recognize that these kinds of projects have the right value, proposition. And I think that over the next 2 to 3 years, we are going to get everything that we've wanted. We're going to get the customers we've been looking for. We're going to get the recognition in the crypto world, and we're going to get everything that we've been looking for. You people are early, and you're going to be early still for another period of time. But I think you've backed the right kind of horse here. And how can we know that for sure? Well, we're still here. And specifically, these two fellows next to me are still here. We don't make a lot of money. And not only do we not make a lot of money, but we have been broke since last December. So at the end of the day, each of these folks to my right or left, depending on how you're looking at this, could have gone out and gotten much higher paying jobs easily, right? In a lot of different fields, a lot of different directions, but they're not. They're still here, and they built a hell of a product. And we all believe in this thing. Now, Jay, I met Jay over in the SIA forums because he was also a trader, right? He was over there trading shit coins, and we would just, do all kinds of little contest things and just have fun moving the coin up and down. And at the end of the day, we were simpatico on ideas. It was a while before I understood where he really came from, but Jay, why don't you go ahead and just start in a little bit and tell us about your history. Go back even before the Peter Jackson companies a little bit. Tell us how you got into the technology sphere, what sort of excited you, and kick us off a little bit about Jay.
Yeah, I left school really early. I left school when I was 16. I didn't even finish high school. I went and did a IT diploma when I was 16. And then just pretty much got straight into working. So I did have a big block recently of work here at Weta. Before that, I had various support jobs, IT manager position, a few other bits and pieces like that. I generally stay in a job for 3 to 4 years each. My goal, I guess, when I was younger, I'm in my 40s now. My goal when I was younger was to get that block of time at Weta or somewhere similar, somewhere with a big environment with lots of storage, large networks, something on the bleeding edge of technology. I found those things like you're mentioning, basic HTML pages wasn't really enough for me. And so I got quite bored at my IT diploma and went straight into networking positions and things like that. I ended up at Weta. I think 2011 or so I started there. And it was around about the time that Bitcoin was kicking off. I did a bit of mining at home. Actually, that was probably 2010 when CPU mining was still possible. Like you, I mined a few Bitcoins, ended up selling them straight away or trading them for lunch or whatever at the time. Didn't really think too much of it and kind of got out of the game. Work took over. Bitcoin was a couple of bucks. I didn't really see the potential, I guess, at the time. It wasn't until that I started having requirements in this space for myself. So I came across the SIA project when I was looking for a large amount of storage for myself. Initially started out using an Amazon product called Amazon Cloud Drive, which they discontinued. And so that's how I think I met you in the first place, was out there looking for a solution for myself. We ended up in SIA land, I guess. Never really didn't get too deep into their product. I used it a little bit. It didn't work for me.
It didn't work at all.
Yeah, from a renter side, it was really clumsy. It was, you could put your files there and get them back potentially. You couldn't do much. You couldn't drive applications using it. You couldn't get your files back quick enough so that you could actually use them in any kind of meaningful way other than the straight backup recovery. There wasn't really any kind of caching, so there was no tearing. It was tough to use as a renter, or as a customer, I guess. That got me back into crypto, back into trading, I guess. That was when exchanges were kind of just getting, or centralized exchanges were just kind of coming around and becoming at least a little bit more trustworthy. We had things before that, but it was very hard to deal with. For 2015, it was really hard to trust real money in the system. I thought anyway. It kind of almost felt like money. Once your money was in the system, it was almost felt like a lottery. You kind of realize that you're probably never going to take your money back out of the system. You probably wouldn't get too much value for it, unless you had a moonshot or something like that. So, and then as you explained, the SIA fork happened and we got talking, and I think we kicked things off pretty quick. Like, it was, once we decided to go forward and try this out, it was like we launched like 3 weeks after our first conversation, I think. We had some talented people who are still floating around, like George, helping with that fork and getting us off the ground. And I think we used a bunch of Java tools initially to do the airdrop and things that we hadn't really touched again since then. Yeah, we just got straight into it, and I don't think we had the vision of what we wanted to do and that we wanted it to be S3. We definitely didn't have the idea that we'd have products like we have now. At least I didn't anyway. We were still kind of on that whole inter-host protocol, and yeah, you can upload some data and you can download some data, but we didn't have that kind of application level vision that we do have now. So it's been a good experience over the last 4 years developing products that can actually sit on top of this network that we've built, that actually work now. You know, they can do all the things that I found I couldn't do back on the old project. I think that's where we've been really successful, is we actually turned something that didn't work to something that not just works, but it's best of breed, in my opinion. And it's so easy to deploy our stuff now, and get it up and running. Yeah, I'm just happy to still be here. So, like you mentioned, we're both still here, and that's not just it's not because of money at all. Really, it's just because I can't imagine doing anything else right now. I wouldn't leave in really any circumstances, because I believe in what we're doing, and I believe where it's going to be in the next few years.
Yeah, so a couple of questions for you. When you talk about where you were working before, if you can just delve into that, just tell us a little bit about what Weta is and how much like infra is down in New Zealand. And you are from New Zealand. I didn't actually say that in the beginning, but Jay is based in New Zealand, and he worked at a company, as he said, called Weta. And if you could just tell us a little bit about what it is, what's there, and what kind of stuff you were wrangling when you were actually working there, when this whole idea that we're doing sort of came up.
Oh, so that was really my first exposure to a large network, and not just a big corporate environment, but supercomputer level of compute and storage and networking. At one time, it was like back in the first Avatar movie, we did all the visual effects with those guys for that, and that turned into one of the biggest supercomputers in the world at the time, just to get through the rendering for that movie. And that was compute and storage at the time. So it was my exposure to walking into a data center that was just rows and rows and rows, all of compute, all in a massive cluster, and all working hard all of the time. It was also kind of the first experience working somewhere where if the technology goes down, it costs the company huge amounts of money, because literally no one else in the company can work. So there's a big requirement for it to be stable and right on the edge. So you couldn't just buy off-the-shelf things, install them, and then let them run. There was a lot of tweaking and tuning, and I guess knowledge from all the other people that worked there. It was a big team. I think when I was in the IT team there, we were probably about 90 people. About 20 of those was in the tech support team, where I first started to get my head around everything. I moved into the systems engineering team, which looked after the actual storage servers, networking, and everything else. Any of the films that they were producing is just insane amounts of data, and it has to move a lot. So you don't just record something and then it sits on a hard drive. It's kind of filmed to a card and then ingested by a data wrangling team into some type of storage. And from there, it gets piped through the render pipeline, and it goes from being the source data, having all the things laid on top of it, and all the artistry and all the work put into it. It comes out some different storage. Once it's on that different storage, it then obviously has to go to tape and things like that. So it wasn't just about storing data, it was about efficiently dealing with it, moving it, angling it, getting it between countries. Often the shoots were in places where there was no network connectivity. And so, like Lord of the Rings, there was a lot of helicopter-only access. So how do you deal with mass amounts of data coming in from middle of mountains back into a data center on the same day, so it can be viewed, looked at, worked on. In essence, it's a film company, but at its heart, it's a software development and data wrangling company with artists in the middle of that process. It's really unique, really interesting, massive amounts of data. I can always see where our kind of product can fit into those kind of pipelines. Not necessarily just with that company, but all companies as well, where currently there's not many options out there other than AWS for all the companies, and they're priced out of existing solutions that are out there, and not just in the actual price, but in terms of what they can do. So you had to ingest some data from one country, you have to ingest it into generally the closest AWS data center. If you have to pull it back to another country, there's a time element there that can drag on. With our kind of network, you can upload from the source country into our network. You put your data pieces back in the home country where the data needs to be restored from or grabbed from. There's lots of potential here for data moving between countries quite quickly and efficiently.
So Jay comes from this network, supervisory background, and having this interfacing with data wrangling and moving data all around and that sort of process. But where his actual skill set has really shined, and where he's actually proven to be exceedingly excellent, is at product design. And what Jay has done for us from a product design standpoint, and I think the thing that really was the big thing there was when we launched the Examiner. So we started out in 2020, I guess it was, on trying to come up with something for an Examiner, and we really didn't, do very well on it. And then in 2021 early, he just kind of picked it up and he said, look, we need to do this, we need to do that, and this is what it needs to look like. And he wrote this excellent document. And essentially we handed it over to some contractors, and we were able to pull something out of that. And then we launched this box in June of 2021. And frankly, it worked from day one. Right? As soon as we launched it, this thing worked really, really, really well. And I think that kind of got, solidified or burnished in there in terms of the product design credentials. And then ever since then, whenever we have a new product about to go out the door or add on or develop or whatever in terms of bringing something else. And look, in case you didn't know this about us, we have about 9 products now, right? We have about 9 specific individual products. And every single one of them has gone through Jay in order to get sort of the overall design of how the user's going to interface with it, how it's going to actually work in our ecosystem, the networking that's involved behind it, the way it's going to talk to the back end, the way it's going to interface with the databasing and everything that's out there. And I think that anybody who uses our UX, across any of our tools, and the partners right now are getting a gigantic taste of this because they're actually in there seeing all of these, advanced tool sets that we've built, the IAM tools, the S3 interfaces, the way we're doing this stuff with proxying and putting out relayers for both colo data center installations as well as on-prem. And the UIs are a dream. And, I've talked at length about our front ender, and we'll talk, with Pavel about the back end and so forth. But the glue or the thing that's actually been to be able to percolate that up to the top that allows us to have put out a superior set of products has been Jay. Jay's actually been that designer guy. And in fact, what ends up happening is he'll sit with the developers and essentially go over things so that it does get built to be right, so that it will work out of the gate. And we haven't had to go back and redo much of anything. And I don't think we've accrued an awful lot of tech debt at this point, because I think we've done a lot of things the correct way right out of the gate. And I think they're going to stand us in pretty good stead. So we'll come back on a little bit of a roundtable with you, Jay. I want to move on to the next guy. So Pavel wasn't there with us in the Saya days, right? And so didn't fight the Saya wars with us. Pavel came along sort of through a circuitous route to find us. What ended up happening is, once we made this decision that we were going to start a project, and remember what had happened is that Saya had went out and decided to take on the Chinese semis by building their own ASIC and essentially throwing off all the other ASICs, essentially jettisoning the Inosilicon S11. Hey, that sounds familiar. And when that happened, we thought there was a really good opportunity for us to grab that hash rate. We never did. We never grabbed it. We got, a couple of petahash of that hash rate. And we, to my way of thinking, I don't have specific, evidence, but it all lines up. I think I could prove it in court if I had to. They made sure that we were not going to get hash rate. We were not going to be a project that got any support from anybody, and we didn't, right? So, but it didn't deter us, and we kept going. And one of the ways that we kept going is that in those early days, one of the things that I said, well, we're going to have to find some developers, right? We're going to have to find some people that can do this. I don't know any developers. I build hardware products and design hardware products, so I don't know any of these people. So what I did was I went out and I looked at the GitHub, and I essentially contacted every single developer that had any commit on Saya at all. But the name that just kept jumping out to me was this young guy who has a picture that looks like Luke Skywalker. And I kept seeing that he would post ideas and thoughts and commits and other stuff in the GitHub. And one thing that I kept seeing over and over and again was David and Luke just kept shooting down his ideas, even though his ideas seemed really, really good for Saya. And that was Boris. And, I got Boris interested in what we were doing, and he did come over to help us out with some initial architecture and so forth. And he was here, but he actually is a lead developer over on another startup, so he couldn't really come aboard full time, and so that wasn't in the cards. He's still with that company, and he's one of the founders, or at least one of the bedrock people there in that company. So I knew all along that he was never going to be that thing, and so I picked his brain. And I said, "Well, do you know any guys?" And he says, "Well, I know one guy." I said, "Well, okay, well, who's that?" He said, "My brother." And now I'm thinking to myself, oh, great. So, this is just some nepotism or whatever. He's going to send me some guy who doesn't even know how to code just because he's related to the guy. And that guy turned out to be Pavel. And Pavel came aboard, and right out of the gate, it was pretty clear he was a very good developer. And he was working on another crypto project at the time called Waves, and essentially doing a lot of pretty significant blockchain-related development. Actually managed the conversion over from proof of work to proof of stake over there for those folks. And he came aboard sort of in that, I'll work on this on the side a little bit, because we didn't have any money at that point. It wasn't paying anybody. It was more about, we're starting this thing off. Let's kick it around. Let's get it going, get an architecture. And then he really started contributing hard, and Boris was getting called away to do other stuff. And so Pavel ended up being pretty much the guy, the sort of the founding core back-end guy. And then when we were able to start paying people, we made an offer and, brought him in, got him in at the ground floor, shares, the whole 9 yards. And then we started raising money and paying salaries and so forth. Pavel, why don't you tell us a little bit about, how you got into computers, how you got into programming, and, what got you into Waves, and then from Waves, talk a little bit about coming here.
Hello, everyone. So basically, my whole career and my whole work experience is about systems programming and building backends. And this is what I did since essentially childhood. And I never really even thought about doing anything else. I enjoyed writing code, and basically the process of turning my knowledge and my thoughts into something that works and converting ideas into code that works. Essentially, putting your knowledge into computer is what inspired me. And so basically, you mentioned waves. I've been in crypto since 2017, and this is my previous blockchain project where I worked on full node implementation. It included all the key components of any blockchain node, so block validation, miner, wallet, and so on. They already had the protocol at this time when I joined the team, and they wanted to get another implementation in another programming language from scratch. So this was mostly the project about implementing already existing protocol and just making more efficient implementation of something. It was interesting, but really not sufficient. I could not really apply all the creativity there and work on my own ideas because the protocol already existed and the whole work was about implementing it. And here on this project at ScPrime, it was completely different. When I joined, basically nothing really existed, and it was just a fresh forked blockchain with nothing and some ideas. And it was just enormous amount of directions we could go, and we could choose any, and I enjoyed it a lot. And then finally I came aboard full time. So we had a lot of good ideas. We had blockchain that already worked. It was also a good point for me because at my previous project I worked on the blockchain itself, and here we already have it ready, and we work on other layers on top of the blockchain. So it was something new for me. And so what I enjoyed most is I like to use stuff that I built. And here I basically use the cloud. I use it for my own files and see the result of my own work that is helping me.
Right now, Jay, you're working on a product called Relayer MT, which is a tool to provision multiple relayers rapidly for coload and data center type partners. Tell us a little bit about that product.
So from a normal relayer perspective, you essentially have one main administrator user. They can go in there and create some IAM policies and things, but we realized there was a space here for our partners and larger customers need to quickly deploy these, and they might need to give their customers access to be able to do the IAM and have their own kind of separate relayer from giving someone access to a bucket. What we've done is we've created a product called Relayer MT. It's almost single click. You put in a couple of fields, the create relay button, and away it goes. Deploy 10 relays in a matter of minutes. As the operator, you can set out the provider profiles, you set every relayer to use all of your examiners and any regions that are preferred from your point of view. And then give out these relays with a limited UI to your customers. At that point, they get full IAM access and create as many buckets as they want. They can split them up amongst the departments in their corporation. It's essentially a click way to deploy many relayers for individual customers, all from a single pane of glass management interface. A lot of development work that is on the cards for it. It's technically it's still version 0.0.1 at the moment, but it's fully functional and working very nicely. It does all the certificate and main management for you, so you don't need to give out IP addresses and ports and things like that. It's all custom URLs for each of the relays for your customers, and it makes everything a lot simpler for an operator who's providing relays as a service to their customers. So it's mainly for partners and people who would run multiple relays but want to have them all easily managed from a single place.
We're selling to MSPs. That's our customer. That's our primary customer is MSPs, cloud service professionals and managed service providers, right? Now, not saying that we won't find and take business from retail people, not saying that other people won't come aboard and use our cloud, because I think they will. I think they'll see it for what it is, and I think they will dive in, in a big way ultimately as time goes by. But the thing about it is that I always knew this right from the day that we envisioned that there was this thing called a relayer to return control to the operator, to the owner of the data, to the creator of the data. From the day that we envisioned that there had to be this thing called a relayer there talking to this distributed, decentralized network, we knew that was going to be a hard sell, right? Because you don't have that on anybody else's clouds. You don't have a relayer at AWS. You don't have a relayer anywhere else. So we knew that that was going to be a hard sell. So there was a lot of evolution in there, starting with Pavel on the core back-end side and how we developed out the code to be able to provision out the modules that make up the relayer. If you go back to the beginning, right, the very beginning of the relayer, it started with his brother showing up one day and saying, well, we need this thing called host IO. Think about it. Host, input, output, right? How do you get stuff out to all the providers? And he said, because I know what I need to do here, I'm just going to write it myself, and it should take me about 4 days, right? And it turned into this big engine architecture that Pavel went and developed all the way along, which is host.io. It's got an S3 gateway. It's got all of these different modules that are built into it that make up the relayer. So to begin with, we had to build out the big engine that is the relayer, and we did that. And then it was like really nightmarish and hard to use, and we couldn't figure out whether it was an app or whether it was executable in DLLs on Windows, or whether it was going to be some kind of a containerized deal, or whether it was just going to be virtual machine, what it was going to look like. So Jay was in there trying to figure that out. Boy, we had some sort of back and forth that went on there. And then finally we did start to dial it in and figure out what it really needed to be. And then it started to get easy. Now it's almost lead pipe simple to stand up a relayer. So there's really no reason for anybody to not be able to stand up a relayer and use it performantly and productively. And that's important, because if it is going to be a hard sell just to get somebody to put this little piece in the middle, right? It was always going to be a difficult sell and limit our cloud opportunities, our ability to sell our product. Guess what's happened? We've turned what was kind of a negative on our project, that you had to put this thing in place, to being an almost overwhelming positive. The fact that we have this relayer is really, really important. And when people start using the relayer and understanding what it gives them back that was taken away from them by AWS, Google, Azure, all the other ones, I think that's where the worm is going to turn for us and things are going to fly. Because once you start using a relayer, you realize it returns serious control back to you, right? You control where all the data lives. You don't have to worry about hitting certain kinds of compliance regimes on geography, for instance. If you're in Europe and they tell you have to stay within a certain border, you know darn well that you are staying in that border. Why? Because you specifically chose the nodes that your data is going to live on, and you control the data going up to those nodes with this relayer. And it's really slick how it works. It's slick how you build those provider sets and how you get that data out there onto those nodes. That control is gigantic. You can build a virtual private data center. It's almost like if you're saying, we're just going to build our own data center here, right? We'll use these nodes over and over and over again because they fit what we're doing perfectly, right? And then you start to get into places like, well, okay, there's, almost no Google or AWS or anybody down south of the equator. So what about Brazil? What about Argentina? What about these places that have pretty good metropolises? They got to have businesses. What are they doing? Well, they're sending their data 3,000 miles away up to Virginia, right? We can go down there now and we can run advertisements in one city, right? Rio de Janeiro, and we can bump up 1,000 providers right there and then. And all of a sudden, you've got a localized virtual private data center that stays in country, very performant. So all of a sudden, the relayer starts to become a serious advantage over any other cloud architecture. And when people see it, and nobody else has it right now, nobody has this architecture. You look at storage, they don't have this. They have federated satellites that they own, right? That are scattered around the planet. Who knows where they are and how they work and how performant. But at the end, it also returns control in that we never have your data. We never see your data. We never know what you have. If somebody from law enforcement comes and says to us, look, this company is putting some stuff up online that's clearly illegal in this jurisdiction, we're going to say, okay, we'll warn them because they're violating the terms of service. And if ultimately they don't, follow the law, we will cut their contract, but we're never going to see their data and we're never going to be able to do anything with their data. We can stop their accessing their data, obviously, by stopping the contract. Based on the terms of service. So when people see that, then they start to realize quickly. And then you get to the performance vector, right? When you start looking at how it works and how Pavel has essentially engineered this way erasure coding works on our thing and how it intelligently is always looking for the fastest nodes, suddenly you start to realize we blow AWS out of the water in terms of performance. Right? So our performance is second to none. And the people will see that when they start using the relayers. And then you get to the big one for everybody, which is the security and durability. We erase your code on premise at the client, right? The client decides all those nodes. And because the erasure coding happens there, the data goes out to at least 120 nodes. And more likely to 200, 300, 400, 500 nodes over a whole data set. So consequently, you'd have to fail something, crazy. It'd have to be 50, 100 nodes that fail before you lose your data, right? So all of a sudden, the security looks really good. It's all encrypted at the client side. 65% of the data that's at the Amazon data centers in the world right now is unencrypted. The NSA just has a backdoor, I think, that they can go in and look at everybody's data whenever they want. Now, encryption's starting to get adopted more and more often in the field, but in our case, it's always been there and it's always there. And then you get to that thing about, the raw security of the encryption in transit and then, sitting on those nodes. Can somebody get in and, futz around with a node and take the data off it? Well, if you get to somebody's examiner and you're somehow able to get into it, the most you're going to see is 1/120th of somebody's data pieces. It's encrypted, so you're going to have quantum computers, so you have to be a time traveler to come back and get it. You won't have any way to match the metadata up to know where the other 119 pieces are. So what are you going to have, right? So we're way more secure. Let's contrast that. You upload it to AWS, so you send it to Virginia, one location. What do? They take the whole copy that you sent to them and they copy it off to another data center. Okay, that's replication. Most people recognize that as mirroring, right? That's like taking one hard drive and making the second one identical and then just continuing to copy over changes so that you have this mirror. That's what they do. That is their durability. Now, what they do is inside their individual data centers, they do erasure coding, right? So they're sending it off to 100 or 200 nodes inside each of those two individual locations. And then by doing all that, they're able to do this math, right? This crazy math, where essentially they say we hit 11 nines because the chances of any one, or 40 of these computers failing is this and this and this. But what you keep missing in that math is this. And how often have two things failed at the same time in your life, right? It's a lot. And that's why every other couple of weeks, some new breach comes up or some new failure comes up where some websites are down or whatever, because it only takes two fails and you lose. In our thing, you got to fail 40 things before you start losing data, and you chose where those nodes are. So if you want ultimate durability, scatter them all over the country, put them from coast to coast, put them all over the globe if you want to have them that way. Anyway, that's the meet the team thing, I think, for today. We'll go ahead and we'll edit this down and put it into a nice tight, probably 1 hour presentation. It'll go up online. We will do more of these and go through the rest of the folks that are here. The sad part about this is that some of the team that was with us is no longer with us, right? Because we had to pare things down because things did get pretty dark financially for us. But, if you wanted to invest in something, what I would say is this. I think you'd want to ask, how invested are the people that are working on it, right? How invested are the people that are there, and how long have they been there working away at it? And what do the prospects look for them to work on it in the future? What do the prospects look like to you, Pavel, working on this going forward in the future? Do you expect that you're going to be here working on this a year, 2 years, 3 years from now?
Yes, basically, I see a very long path ahead, and I want to see the project in a much larger scale, and essentially it would be really cool to see the proof that current ideas and current the direction works out.
How about you, Jay? You leaving next week? You finding another job? Oh, you already said you weren't. So,
I don't even generally take holidays. So no, I'm here. I'm in for the long run. I'll be here till the end, or however that goes. I'm sure. Got pretty high confidence that over the next 6 to 12 months we're going to see some pretty crazy things happening on our network. Large amounts of data coming in, and so once data comes in, the providers come, and once the providers come, then the data comes. So it's always exciting when either one of those two things starts moving, because the other one's about to start moving too.
And if you go back to 2021, this is almost identically to what happened in 2021. We shipped the Examiner. We didn't know what was going to happen with the Examiner. I mean, look, come on, think about it. What could we have possibly have guessed was going to happen with the Examiner, right? We sold a few early, mostly to stakeholders, investors, and people like that, and then we picked up a few more. And this guy got his hands on one who was just completely not in the community, not in crypto, not in anything. He's just a passive income guy. And he saw the value and he thought it was really cool. And then we got a couple of other things that happened where some guys put together some videos on top of that video because they wanted to sort of run up the crypto thing. And look, we discouraged it. We made it clear, what the story was, but the Examiners took off. And remember, I could have sold 5,000 to 7,000 of those things back then, but I limited it to 1,100 at that December period. And 1,100 was a crazy number for us at that point. It was literally an exponent from where we were. But the way we felt in 21 is the way we feel right now, right? The way we felt in the summer of 2021 was exactly how we feel right now. That excitement's building internally. We know now that we're not firefighting anymore. We know that we're not, dealing with infrastructure collapsing and trying to figure out how to make sure it all fits together. Yeah, we still got some things. Mining is not secure. There's no doubt about that. Our mining could be compromised right now, but we can get that solved pretty easily once we get the use coming in and we get the funds, the money, and everything starting to come down the pipe. So anyway, thanks everybody for being here, and thanks everybody for being part of the community. We will get through this crypto winter. Things will turn, the worm will turn, and the product is going to sing. So I think by the time we get to this time next year, we're all going to be pretty happy and pretty pleased with everything that we've been involved with. And thanks you for showing up today. Have a good day.